Hello, Gary Champion, psychic medium. I was sitting here minding my business, and one of my guys, no, I don't know which one, said I should talk about grieving alone. It's something I've not discussed, I don't think, or if I have, I'm unaware of it, because I don't grieve alone. Um, those people who have passed that I'm missing come around all the time, as they do with you. So when you're grieving the loss of a loved one, you're never doing it alone. Although you may not can see them, they're there to heal your pain, as someone said this morning. But if you don't know or see the people who are gone around you, everybody's lost somebody once you reach a certain age. So it's hard if you're a child, though. If you're most children, they haven't had time to lose anybody yet, so they haven't grieved any. A lot of kids lose mother in childbirth. I talked to a lot of people whose fathers died when they were 3 or 4. It's very difficult, and there's often no time to grieve. Your remaining parent is struggling with it alone. So, and they're usually working a lot and trying to deal with family and things like that. So they're grieving alone too. How do you include someone in your grief? Most people aren't interested. And that's the honest truth. You sit down and start telling them the story of your loss, they find something else to do. Unless they're empathetic or have lost the very same thing you have, which makes them empathetic. Then they'll sit and listen, but they only want to hear it once. And some people, if they're grieving, repeat the same thing day after day, month after month, year after year, and they never get over the grieving. Even the loss of a pet can be 20 years later, be terrible. I get a lot of that. Someone's saying domino, and I'm seeing a Dalmatian, so I've heard that one before, they wouldn't have mentioned it. Or one of you has a Dalmatian named Domino, and it's just their way of trying to help you grieve over it. Because you don't move into the future until grieving is done. Grieving can be short and simple, and a lot of people who are not empathetic don't suffer grieving. They do it a short period of time, they move on. Their lives quickly move past. Put them in the ground and let's go. Other people, even maybe at the time that someone was alive, they didn't really appear to have that close a connection, but they did. Grieving alone is difficult. Grieving with other people makes it a lot easier. There's group therapy for that. I know I have on my site, I have a page called Helplines, and there's some stuff down there about animals and people. But the process of grieving is something we all go through kind of alone. It's hard to share it with someone, which slows it up. Grieving shared with other people goes pretty quickly. If you have a large family and they get together and they talk about so-and-so, then that sort of brings it right back up. And there are people that will bring up the passing of someone 40 years before at every family meeting, guaranteed to sink that meeting into depression. Then people start crying, and you don't want to be there. Well, but these people don't do it because they're trying to be mean. They're doing it because they just haven't grieved yet. Everybody grieves at a different speed. Mediums, I don't think grieve. I don't, because they're still here. They're gone, but they're around, and one of them just told me their name, so I know they're around. And they're gone to tragic consequences, leaving a mess in their wake. How do you grieve alone? It's easy if you sort of relive their life. Go through, remember all the good things, and put the bad ones in, but I don't tend to remember the bad ones. I tend to remember the good ones. Relatives that have passed that were not so good, as time goes on, I don't remember the bad things. I only remember the fun we had, or how interesting they were, or little things they did that were made life interesting. So I don't hold on to those things like most people do, and as it should be. But if you do a review of their life, I have relatives I don't know hardly anything about, even though I saw them not a lot, maybe once or twice a year. How much can you learn in that period of time, especially if they're a real closed mouth? Grandfather didn't say much at all. You'd be around him all day. It's hard to have a conversation with. He just didn't have much to say. And when his wife was alive, they chattered all the time. I was around them. They did a lot of interaction, and once she passed, he got real quiet. But how do I? And he's a person I've been looking at his life, and the short relationship I had with him, and the things that were interesting about him. You're not going to learn anything about this guy by him telling you, because he just wasn't interested. But if you look at the debris of someone's life, you learn a lot about him. He was a woodworker, and yet by the time I met him, he didn't do any woodworking. The tools were lying around rusting. But at one time, he must have been pretty good, because he had some really, really fine tools. He went into something else. He moved into another kind of a job, and had a wide range of things he could do. He electrified houses. I mean, he was around when houses weren't electrified. They didn't have. I'm starting to talk like an old guy now. Electrified. We electrified that. We put. And flush toilets didn't exist. Everything was out back. You lit a candle, or you had those old coal oil lanterns. And how interesting life was. Difficult, I'm sure. But you review someone's life, as little as you know about it, and remember it for what it was. Not, and again, I say, it's easy to grieve if you don't remember the bad things. Everybody's got bad things. I've got a ton of them, I'm sure. But I'm trying to remember the good things, what they did. Little things. My grandfather used to roll his own cigarettes. He smoked Camels, no filter. That's tough right there. But I remember watching him roll cigarettes when I was real little. I don't know if he was any good at it or not. I was fascinated with the procedure. He had ashtrays everywhere, but he had some that were made out of old cartoon characters from his time. Mutt and Jeff. Mutt and Jeff, it were just planks, but they were cut out in the shape of a cartoon character and painted, black and white, and they had eyes and ties and hats and things, and that was an interesting idea. And then the part that held the ashtray was put on like that. Carpentry stuff he did. So it's easy to grieve if you can look at their life and find something in it to hold on to that was good, and kind of let the rest of it go. You want to hold on to every bad, nasty thing that your father did to you, or your mother did to you, or your uncle did to you. You're in a conundrum, especially if in later years you really liked them, because you have this good bad relationship with them. I'm saying the bad doesn't outweigh the good, and drop the bad, they're dead. What do you want to punish them? Drag them up out of the grave? Yeah, you didn't send me a present on my birthday. Or worse things. Remember the good things. And that's kind of what I remember. My mother and father at their basic core were good people. Quiet people. You'd hardly know they were around. And that's what I remember. Real little things. Going fishing in a boat with a cane pole, which no one would do today. But back then, you could cut your own cane. It grew out of the ground, you'd cut it and put a string on it and run it out the end, put a bobber and a hook on it, and you were in business. Put your lead weight on there to maybe balance it out if you wanted to. A can of worms, you could catch fish. I remember doing that. I remember catching a fish once that was a gar. If you're from Texas, gars are kind of a terrible trash fish. And this was a big one. It pulled the boat. I was a little kid, but it was pretty dramatic. We didn't have an anchor. We just would go out in this old boat, and little 12-foot John boat, and made out of wood, really. And the fish was big enough to pull the boat. See, those are the things I remember. The time we were out in the field and he saw this big wasp nest up in a tree far away. And he thought he had a shotgun with him for, I don't know why. I don't know why anybody carry a shotgun, but he had one with him. He thought it'd be fun to shoot that nest, and he did. And we ran for a couple of miles because they chased us. We didn't get stung, but as we just ran out of energy, they were just turning to go back because I turned around and saw there was still some in the air. Very funny thing. Hard to describe unless you were there. The delight of seeing, it was huge. It was the biggest wasp nest I've ever seen. Much bigger than this. And he hit it with that shotgun. And then the huge fear of, am I going to be stung to death? And they were red wasps. I don't know if you have those where you're at, but that's a nasty sting. 2 or 3 of them probably starting to send you to the hospital. And he had shot a whole nest of them, thousands of them. Just, and then we laughed about it for a long time. How could you think that was going to be fun? I don't know. I just thought I was going to do it. So these are the things I remember. If you have a friend you can tell the story to, you can explain why you miss someone, share it, but don't overshare it, because then you lose a friend. I can hear from the noise downstairs that my wife and her nephew are coming back home from, there's a trampoline place down the street, and she's been there, and the whole floor is bouncy, so they've been down there. Anyway, grieving's a tough thing. I had been in the room with elderly gentlemen who just lost their brother, and 2 weeks later their dog died. They didn't mention the brother, except my brother died recently. But my dog, and then they start crying. And you think, you're going to have to call somebody. And why? Because his brother was probably a terrible person. The dog always forgave him for whatever happened. Dogs are like that. Dogs don't hold a grudge. They come back and say, how you doing? Every time you leave and come back, and hey, what's going on? People punish you for stealing their last stick of gum out of their whatever. Try not to grieve alone. Try and find somebody. And there are organizations for that. I just don't have them at my fingertips. I'm sure you can find them. And try to remember the good of these people. If there is any. If there isn't any good, then you're probably not grieving them. See, that's the thing about grieving. There has to be some good there for you to remember in order to grieve the loss. I think it was Shakespeare. Oh my gosh, my high school English teacher is here. Oh, what a wonderful teacher she was. She's saying the good is often interred with their bones, which means the good's often buried when someone goes into the grave, and only the bad's remembered. I don't know what that's from, Richard III or some. The good is often interred in their bones. In Old English, interred is what it means, but it was read as interred in their bones. I don't tend to think that. I tend to think that the good is alive and well and the bad is buried, for me anyway. So if you have to grieve, try and bury the bad, keep the good. The good you remember in people that have passed often makes a cloudy day really, really fun. No fear, no regret, no anger. Thanks for watching.